Well, we are at 5 minutes after, and I think to be respectful of everyone's time, we will go ahead with introductions, and that will give the remaining few participants who are joining us a chance to get signed on. That we don't want to keep all of you waiting any longer. So my name is Heath Pickerel. I'm director of the Missouri Local Technical Assistance Program, LTAP. I am joined by Christy Barr, the program and training coordinator. We are coming to you from Rolla, Missouri. I'm here at Missouri University of Science and Technology, and we manage Missouri's LTAP program and have for many years. We are going to be turning this over to Jack Witt and others with the Missouri Pavement Preservation Council. We appreciate them reaching out to us to be involved in this. I want to say a big thank you to Christy. She has done most of the work on our end here at LTAP in coordinating with everyone and getting this set up. Again, it's our pleasure to be involved as Missouri LTAP. And with that, Jack, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Heath. And Christy, I appreciate it. You've done a great job getting all this together. It's I don't know how we would have done it without you. So I want to welcome everybody to the first webinar series with the Missouri Pavement Preservation Council. And my name is Jack Woody. I'm president of Corrective Asphalt Materials. And I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about the Missouri Pavement Preservation Council, a little background and what our purpose is. And then I'm going to hand it over to our two speakers. So if you'll just bear with me for a second, I'm going to share my screen. So a little history of the Missouri Pavement Preservation Council. This was put together, started last year with myself and company Burns and Jones Construction, and we wanted to put together an organization that promotes pavement preservation. And the organization is governed through the National Center for Pavement Preservation out of Michigan State University. So they're the governing body of this. There's two other preservation councils, one in Florida, which has been around since 2010, and the Georgia Carolina Council, which started in 2012. Again, the purpose of this is to basically promote pavement preservation to target state, local, and county agencies. And we want to promote all aspects of pavement preservation, education, and training of these public agencies. And we're going to do that through the National Center for Pavement Preservation. The founding members of this organization are Mike Hartman with Missouri Petroleum, Caitlin Hecklick with Microsurfacing Contractors, Brett Gaither with Microsurfacing Contractors, myself with Corrective Asphalt Materials, and Sean Bruce with Vance Brothers. So the four of us came together and we realized there was a need to promote preservation through education. This is not a sales pitch. We want to train people and educate them on preservation, promote the importance of preservation. So the four of them together and thought this would be a great vehicle to do that. And we've basically worked together for the last 3 or 4 months to put our first webinar. As we move, we will start new members to the organization. Specifically, we're looking for academic, more industry members, associate members, academic members, and government members. Industry members that can include contractors and suppliers. Associates would include consultants, test laboratories, private developments, academic, university, professional schools, and then government affiliates. You know, all the state, local, federal, city engineers, county engineers, not individuals, people like that. So as we start to build this organization, we will start reaching out more to see if there's people interested in becoming an industry member. But we're trying to connect with, again, state, local, and county agencies to promote pavement preservation. With that, like I said, we have 3 more webinar presentations coming up throughout the year. We're sticking more this year, and then next year starts, we're going to evaluate how everything plays out, what's going on in the world, and hopefully start doing in-person training. And I mean by that, we'll move around the states and do different training sessions at different locations, you know, maybe in Kansas City, St. Louis, St. Joe, Springfield, move this around and do in-person training. But for right now, we're sticking with the webinars. With the training will involve speakers from outside Missouri. So we'll bring in industry experts or agency experts that have, let's say, expertise in micro, but there'll be people from outside the state. We're going to stick with that. It won't be myself presenting on different things. So that with that, I'm going to hand it over to the speakers. And our first speaker we have is Chris Evers. Chris basically helped start the Florida Pavement Preservation Council, and he's the executive coordinator for the Pavement Preservation Council. Our second speaker is Larry Galehouse. Larry's the founder and director emeritus for the National Center for Pavement Preservation. Larry's been around for many years. He's kind of the guru of pavement preservation. This is one of his passions, and he's a very good resource for any of you local agencies that have questions over pavement preservation. You can reach out to him or Chris. Again, with this organization, we're here to help answer questions in a non-biased way. So if, as we grow, we want to make this a resource for local agencies and state agencies to come to us if they have questions over preservation. So Chris,
Sure.
I'll stop babbling. I'm going to hand it over to you and press mute because I can talk forever. Let me stop sharing my presentation.
Fantastic. I will hop in and get mine up and running. So hello, everybody. Hopefully everything is going well in beautiful Missouri. I'm from Kansas. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. So I'm a neighbor, a former neighbor. Anyway, I'm happy to be here. Right now I reside in Vero Beach, Florida, and that's about all we'll say about that. It's close to the beach, and you guys are welcome to come over here and hang out with us at any time, either for training or for vacation. So it's a fun state to hang out in. But I am coming to St. Louis, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll be at PWX. So if anybody is at PWX, certainly would love to talk preservation, which is what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today. Really, the outline for this course is this right here. We're going to introduce pavement management and planning and how to use, PCI and get into that. Larry, who you've already heard, is a real legend in the pavement preservation space and my kind of partner in crime over the last year and a half, 2 years actually, since I took over FPPC. And he's going to talk about remaining service life, what it is. And then I'm going to finish up with one of my favorite things to do, which is to talk about worst first strategy and why it's not going to take you to the promised land. And I'll kind of highlight what that is. Now, just to preface, we do not criticize people that are using worst first. We're here to educate why the strategy may not be a good strategy, but there's various reasons why people over the years have used this strategy. It's not to make them wrong. It's just to show them that there's another better path. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. So
Chris, do you want to address questions real quick?
Yeah. So we're going to we'll do a poll question. But yeah, let me address, there's going to be two types of questions. There's going to be poll questions, which we're going to do, and you're going to see that. And then there's also going to be just general Q&A. And if you want to throw, if it's a quick and easy question that you want to throw in the chat, do that. Find the chat box and throw the question in there. If it's during Larry's, I'll try to get to it as well, and Jack can man the stuff while I'm in it. And then at the very end, we'll have a separate time when we have general questions or something that may have come up. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so we do have a poll question for this first one, and it's not this. It's not, do you prefer sun or rain in the summer? That's just the slide. But we do have some questions we're going to ask throughout. It's really to kind of stay engaged with you and then engage the audience as well. So I think Christy's going to help me with getting the poll question up. All right, so what is your level of familiarity with pavement management planning and pavement preservation? So let's kind of see what the audience says. I love watching these things go live and see, what everybody says about their own knowledge or lack of knowledge. And then as we get close, we'll kind of cut it off. So get those answers in, get those answers in. We got a few more folks, stragglers. Absolutely. We get a couple more seconds. And okay, so we'll end the poll. I think I can do that actually. All right, so if we look at this, we're talking kind of middle of the road. We've got some overachievers here in the high category. And then we've got kind of the highest level is moderate, and then we've got some low and none. The nones will drop off after today. That's our goal. And if you stick through the 4 modules that we'll be having over the next few months, I think it'll be fair to say that you'll be creeping up into the low and moderate range. So that's what our goal is for sure. And so we're going to hop right in. I'll close this out and let's go to the next slide. So what is the definition of management? I love using definitions. I've got the Merriam-Webster app, and I basically start immediately hopping in and figuring out what the definitions of words are. And so the act or art of managing or supervising something, right? We kind of know that. Judicious use of means to accomplish an end. So you look at the synonyms and think about if we're in the pavement management business, we're in charge of caring for, or we're supposed to be good stewards and operating that asset. And it is the most valuable fixed asset most agencies have in their assets. So if we look at the next thing that we're going to kind of talk about is pavement management philosophy. So we want to know, as far as pavement management and philosophy, what are some of the things that we can use to assist us in this stewardship? And you can see there's a bunch of stuff on here. We're going to get into some of it, but it can be a whole webinar. In fact, in Florida, we already had a webinar to cover this exact thing. There's a lot here. And so for those of you out here who kind of low and moderate, just to understand that there's certainly a lot of different systems, whether that's kind of the early PACER model, which is kind of that 1 to 10. You've probably heard that 0 to 100 PCI, or pavement condition index. And then you've probably heard, was things like some of these proprietary systems, or what APWA has, which is called PAVER, used to be called micropaver. So you're going to hear all about this, but it's really there as a tool to help you inventory the condition of the pavements. Now, some of these get into what you see here, which is more of a decision tree, where you can build that out yourself. Some of them get into backlog reports and help you plan and program for the future. Let's get that second question, and then the poll questions will slow down a little bit here, but we really want to know, what's going on. Do you have, a pavement management system in place? Looks like it cut some of this off. So the top one is we don't have a pavement management system, and we use worst first. And second one is we don't have it, but we do use preservation strategies. That third one, as I recall, is we have a pavement management system that prioritizes kind of the different processes and such. And then that last one is a fully optimized system. So this might be, that you're running micropaver or proprietary system. So we'll see how everybody answers this. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Everybody kind of has their preferences. And I've run into some pretty substantial agencies that don't have anything. Now we try to, show them why that's not maybe the best approach for them, but give it a few more seconds. Sorry, this kind of got cut off here. I have to remember that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end it so we can keep moving forward. So it's pretty balanced, as we can see. We have a lot of folks who are kind of using just that, worst first prioritization, which might mean that they're, in essence, take a list of roads, look at the age of the roads, maybe look at just a windshield survey. And then we have kind of a representative sampling throughout. So we'll kind of go through that and show you, and then get into some of the details with that. So, okay, let me close this, move to the next one. Okay. Now, this is what I tell people all the time. You can't really have a decision tree if you only have one branch. Did find a one branch tree right here, little tiny branches, but it doesn't look very effective, does it? And so, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so, you know, we see this oftentimes where we'll run into agencies where the only two tools they have is overlay and mill and overlay. And that's really something that you can very easily and quickly optimize to produce some really fantastic results. And we'll go through those results. But, you know, here's some of the strategies that you might see along the entire, you know, deterioration curve. You're going to see us talk about the curve. This is the curve. So we'll talk about this, but you know, you get way up at the top where you've got more of the top of the curve strategies, which are purely preservative and really aggressive to preserve the pavements, all the way down to the bottom of the curve. So which treatment is appropriate for each condition? That's what we want to know. So when is the best time to address a leak in the roof? Is it when you see kind of a little water stain, which I had last year, or is it this situation, right? What we want to catch is we want to catch them here. It's a lot less expensive, a lot less intrusive, does not affect the public nearly as much. So that's where we want to kind of live. We want to be have a tremendous amount of effort going into the preservative side. And then obviously we're going to have some where we have to do rehabilitation. So why PCI? Now, what is it again? It's the Pavement Condition Index, and it's really the baseline of the health of your network. So if you look at your network, you can look at this as kind of letter grades. There's several different kind of approaches. You can look at the different levels: good, satisfactory, fair, poor, very poor, failed. You know, so there's several different approaches to take. But it's something that we all understand, right? If your kids bring a 55 home, you know what that means. It means they're grounded, but you know what that means in relation to 90. And so that's where we kind of look at it. It also helps with, in essence, not only making sound decisions as to what treatment should be used, but it also helps us to communicate with elected officials, and we need to be able to do that. That's very important. So rarely is a solution one size fits all. That's one of the things that I talk a lot about. So if you look at this, you can kind of see, I love this Peter Drucker quote: "What gets measured gets managed." And that's what we want to do. So if you're not managing, or if you're not measuring your network, then you're really not adequately managing it. And so one of the things we want to focus on is implementing these specific measures and set these goals. So know your paving cycle. It's one of the easiest things you can do. To calculate that, just take your normal resurfacing budget. If it's the same, let's say it's $1 million, and divide that by the number of miles, lane miles you have. And if you have to tell Mrs. Jones that her road is, you know, assuming the normal resurfacing budget, not going to get resurfaced until star date 2163, then you know there's a problem, right? So you want to know your network level at all times, as much as you can, kind of know what that is. And then working with management and elected officials to really set that minimum network condition target. Do you want to be at a 70? Are you at a 60 and you want to get to a 70? You definitely don't want to stay at a 60. That's the terminal threshold, which Larry's going to get into. And then really determine those funding levels required to hit the targets. You know, it's one thing to set a goal, but really what we want to focus on is the targets to get to that goal. And so that's how we need to set that. So let's pull up poll question number 3, if we could. Okay, here it is. So how do you currently measure success in your agency, or if you're in the private sector for your client? We don't. We just spend what they give us per year. That's a real answer. We measure the paving cycle. Example, you know, hey, we've got X number. We're going to have a 20-year design life. We have a minimum network condition level, or we have I would say this is the high level, minimum network condition level, ID, you know, proper funding levels, and optimize, and all those, you know, neat, nifty things. I will tell you, I have some folks that we work with here in Florida that have had the same resurfacing budget, let's say $500,000, since I arrived here in the early 2000s. And you sit there and say, you know, you guys need to raise the cost of living, if you will, and the inflation has eaten up probably, you know, half of your budget. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So as you can see a lot of folks here answering that top answer, and that's we don't. We just spend what they give us per year. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if you could share with those elected officials, you know, if you want to increase the network condition, we need twice that, or this current level of funding is going to mean that in 10 years, we're going to be at a 30%, you know, as far as the network health. So these are things that, you know, pavement management and some of these systems are designed to give you. And so that's what we're going to try to share with you as we go in here. So a lot of people ask this question. Again, this is just an introduction, but we want to talk about frequency of data collection. You know, what good is it if the inventory is old? And so I tell people all the time, look, the standard, the best case would be every 3 years. You could do a third of your network every year. That's something a lot of people do. But once you're getting into 4 and 5 year old data, the condition index is probably pretty stale by then. So at that point, you know, you kind of go, geez, I mean, we're going to have to take this with a grain of salt. So this is why, and the same thing we do with going to the doctor or dentist. And some agencies spend, you know, literally millions of dollars with stale data. And it's not wise, you know, to make a decision like that, a very expensive decision based on something that's old. So again, recommended frequency is 3 years. Now, what, you know, when you look at it, this is just one of our folks here, definitely a leader in pavement preservation and pavement management, Polk County here in Florida. But if you think about your pavement management plan, which we call kind of a PMP for short, you should really look at some key decisions that you're going to need to make. One, you know, is this something you're going to perform in-house, or are you going to outsource it? Look at the size of your agency and say, well, are we big enough to handle this in-house, or do we need to bring on a consultant for that? Some of the other considerations, what software should you use? Does your consultant provide a work plan? So these are just a few of the things that we try to, you know, look for and what we suggest here in Florida to do. So, you know, this is one of my, you know, favorite couple quotes. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. That is absolutely true. And if you look at, again, some more Polk County examples, you can see here just through their master work plan, what they're doing, you know, where they're addressing needs in their roads. They have a very robust decision tree that goes through and takes into consideration a number of the different factors, and then crunches this and generates that health indicator. So, you know, it really is changing the way you look at things. And by doing that, you're going to have a lot more luck. So I'm going to kick this over to Larry, and he's going to hop in and go through the remaining service life. And then I'll come back and spend some more time with you towards the end.
Thank you, Chris. And it's a pleasure to talk with all of you folks today. I want to first take the time to thank Christy and Heath, because without the LTAP Center, we could never reach you folks. And I think it's very important that we get this word out. And I've been in this business for quite a while. I started the first pavement preservation dedicated program in the United States. That was in 1992. And since that time, and this is when I was with the Michigan Department of Transportation. When I retired there, then I began the National Center for Pavement Preservation, and I've had some tremendous opportunities. I've traveled to all of 50 states. I've met with probably most all of the DOTs in the 50 states and done evaluations with Federal Highway and so on and so forth. It's kind of interesting because everybody is kind of facing the same problems. And a lot of it is that the money seems to periodically get shut off from up above. So let's kind of go through some things. I also want to talk about the fact that we're hitting this whole idea of management systems in the first round to give you an idea how to think about your network. Then we're going to get into a little deeper on the second round. We're going to really start talking about the stresses on your pavements. And what's What's the reason for that? A distress will really tell you what the problems are with the pavement. It will talk to you literally, and then that way you can determine whether or not pavement preservation is a useful response to the pavement, or if it really needs structural help. The third presentation we're going to talk about is the top of the curve. What are the treatments you can do early on at very, very low cost that will keep your network going? And then finally, we're going to get into the last presentation of this series. We're going to talk about heavier treatments. And those are the ones that I'm sure most of you are used to, but nonetheless, we want to review what's important about all of those. So getting into this and starting off, the first thing I want to talk about is something nobody cares about, but that's definitions. And I want you to think about it in this way. Your network took a long time to deteriorate. So there is no way in the world that I can tell you that by doing pavement preservation, I can turn your network around. It's a slow process. It takes a number of years. If you started today, you could start to see results depending on how bad your network is. You could start to see results in maybe 2 or 3 years. The public may not see it for another year or two beyond that. It takes a long time, but think about the time it took for your network to deteriorate. It took a long time. Let's talk about this definition though. And what the point is I wanted to say is this is network level. This is not project level. We're talking about the network. We're talking about a long-term strategy. Like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. This is a long-term strategy. It will enhance your pavement performance. It's cost-effective. The biggie here is it will extend your pavement life. And that's what we're talking about. We're extending your pavement life. It will also improve your safety on certain roads, and it will certainly make the motorist much happier. This is a definition right out of map 21. So pavement preservation is in the congressional record. So let's talk about a starting point here. Let's talk about indices, because if you're going to catalog how your pavement is performing, you have to look at the indices. In other words, you want to look at your rutting, you want to look at your cracking, you want to look at your alligator cracking, and it goes on. You can get it down to every indice imaginable. And I'll tell you this now, I'll tell it to you again. Only look at the indices that are really going to mess up your network. One of the things that you'll find a lot of people will try to push you to collect everything out on the road. I'm of the opinion, no, just collect the things that are going to kill your road first. And in Missouri, if you see a lot of rutting, that's something you definitely want to look at. If you see a lot of transverse cracking, that's something you want to look at. You're probably not looking for slippage cracks. You're probably not looking for a lot of these other minute details and cracks, but look at the things that are going to kill your road first. So if we look at the itemized indices, that's important. Your combined pavement distress index, that's based on 2 or more types of distresses. I'm not too wild about that, and I'm not too wild about your overall pavement condition index if you're combining all of your distresses into one basket. And what I mean by that is that certain distresses will kill you before other distresses will. And we'll get into that a little bit when I start defining this. There are rating systems out there. I'm not going to take away any of them, but some of them are probably a little outdated. For example, the PACER system was developed by the University of Wisconsin. I remember years ago going there and listening to how the PACER system was set up and so forth. I thought it was a good system to begin with, but you know, as time rolls on, we got to look at things a little different. And for example, their rating scale is from a 10 to a 9. They're saying no maintenance is required. Well, maintenance can be required from day one. So to say you'll never get maintenance if the road is new, that's a misnomer. The other thing is they're saying cracking and minor patching. That's 8 to a 7. Well, where does that all fall into? Because that's a little different. Preservation is about the midway point in that system. It's a 6 to a 5. Well, you're not going to get ahead with preservation if you wait until the road is too far deteriorated. You want to do it early. So, that system had a few problems. Well, then AASHTO come up with a couple systems. They come up with a PSI and they come up with a PCR. And the PSI, that was based on ride and rut and cracking and patching. Well, there's a little bit more to it than that. And, you're talking about relegating the roads to just a few numbers, and that was a 5 down to a 0, which a 5 is excellent. 0, as I have on the screen here, it's essentially impassable. Well, we don't necessarily have that many roads that are totally impassable. And then we get down to the PCR, and that was originally set up with the AASHTO road test. And that was in Illinois, Ottawa, Illinois. That was in 56 to 1961. And it looked at all of the distress types in the pavement, and it began to assign severity weights to each one of the distresses. Well, PCR is not bad, but I think we moved up. And now I would say that an awful lot of the agencies, local agencies in particular, are using the PCI. And we can talk about that, but I first have a survey question. And Christy, if you could post that survey question. I don't see the survey question.
I gotta wake Christie up.
Yeah, we'll give it just a second. If she doesn't have it, we can come back to that question. Okay, let's move on, and we'll come back to that question in a minute. Let's talk about the advantages. Oh, are we getting some questions up there?
No, you're fine. Keep going.
All right. Let's talk about some of the advantages of a pavement rating system. And obviously, a lot of us can remember an awful lot of things about our roads. When I was with the state of Michigan, there were an awful lot of roads I could remember the condition to, but geez, you start thinking about it, you lose track. So you got to have some way to rate those roads.
Larry,
And-
I'm back. I apologize. My computer froze up.
Oh, okay. Can we put the question up?
Sure.
All right. You want to post the question. And I'm interested in knowing a little bit about what the audience is doing. What's your pavement rating system? And so are you using PACER, are you using PSI, the Present Serviceability Index, PCR, the pavement condition rating, the PCI, or some other system? So we'll give you a little bit more time. Plug in your answer. Okay, it almost looks like an even split here. We're getting more people coming on. We have 49 participants and only 26 have answered. So come on, folks. All right. Well, we're going to shut it off here. And it looks to me like the results are pretty even between the PACER and the PCI. And so that's very good. So we'll move ahead. All right. So anyway, let's talk about the whole advantage of the rating systems. Better communication. We can set up a threshold value when things are, boy, this is all I need right now. When things are starting to go to the point that we're at a point of no return. That's called our threshold, and we'll get into that a little later. We can sort and rank our roads. We can also rate the deterioration performance. It helps us track some of the designs. There's a lot of reasons to have a pavement management system. The old days, maybe you could write it down on the back of a piece of paper and keep it in a desk drawer. You can't do that anymore. We have just too much to take care of, and there's just no way in the world that you could possibly be able to rate your roads with a system of scratching on a piece of paper anymore. So you've got to have some sort of rating system, management system. Again, they all use some sort of itemized distress index. That's so important with every one of them. And we're going to use them in this new approach I'm going to show you. Here's a problem that you've all faced. You go to a city council meeting and you're trying to describe your needs to the council. And these are the folks generally that are holding the money. And everybody wants a share of that money. You have police and fire, you have the water and sewer, you have development associations, and yet you're trying to describe your needs to the people that really don't understand what you're talking about. And even once they're educated, the election cycle is such that they change quite often. So you've kind of got your back to the wall and you're trying to get your point across, but it's very, very difficult to do. And that's the city. Now you go into a county and you're facing the same doggone thing. You know, these are the folks that are holding your money. They're elected on a short-term basis as most of the time. People want funds for the new roads, but they want planning studies. They want law enforcement. They want to put money into their parks and reserves and so forth. It's a never-ending struggle. And so how do you communicate with these folks without getting the deer in the headlight look? And that's what we're talking about, because I've sat and I've tried to talk to the Transportation Commission, and you still get deer in the headlight looks. So a lot of times we've got to think about what can we do to kind of change their thought pattern where we can get the point across. And so that's what we're going to start talking about, because there's some shortcomings of these rating systems, and I'm going to share with you. One, it only indicates the condition at the time of the survey. It doesn't account for your design life. It doesn't account for your rate of deterioration. It doesn't account for long-term behavior. And those are all things that people want to know. So that's one of the problems with our existing systems. And yet we can look at a typical deterioration curve over time, and it starts to kind of sink in if we look at it in a little different light. Here's your typical deterioration curve. You can see on the vertical axis, you have everything from very good all the way down to very poor. And then you can see the time span of years along the x-axis. But you know, roads they don't all take this form. I mean, this is just something that somebody drew up, but every road acts different. This is what you're faced with. You have 3 roads. So I got a survey question. You only have a little amount of money. And I know that's every agency faces that. So where do you put your money? Would you put it in road A? Would you put it in road B? Or would you put it in road C? And those are the decisions that they're paying you to make. So let's put the survey question up. Who puts it in road A, road B, and road C? We're getting some answers here. Let's take a look at it. Give you another couple seconds to jump on. This is what you folks are dealing with on a day in, day out basis. Where do you put your money? Okay, let's end the poll. All right, well, it's pretty close, except the one with the least amount of votes is the one that was right. You see, what we're really looking at here is the rate of deterioration. This road was constructed not that many years ago. You know, you look at the timeline here, probably about 2 years ago. From this point, it started to crash and burn. This road, maybe it didn't start out so great, but look at it. The rate of deterioration is very slow. Here is a road that started out great condition, but over time it starts to deteriorate. So you would put your money in the road with the slowest rate of deterioration. This road could be 20 years old, where this road will never make it to 20. And this road is far worse condition than the good road here. So it's important to really look at the rate of deterioration on a roadway. And it's like this Timex watch commercial. Maybe some of you have heard about it. You know, they take a licking and keep on ticking. Well, that's some of these roads. You don't know why, but some of them just last forever. And I've seen roads that are constructed the same way, same design, by the same contractor, using the same material. Traffic is pretty close to the same, and they behave different. And you've all seen that too. They don't all stand up the same. So let's go to the next slide here. This is where you're spending your, they all are rated the same way. This is what your current condition rating tells you. You see your other ratings, your PACER and your PCI. PCI is getting much better though. They'll give you a level, whether it's an 80 or a 4 or whatever it is, it's giving you a rating. But that in itself doesn't tell you the rate of deterioration. You need something in addition to that, because you don't have the money to address them all. You better address the money that you have wisely and put it on the road where it's going to do the most good. So let's move on. Okay, let's throw another survey question up here. Christy, do you have another survey question? Okay. Does your agency use or consider using remaining service life? And then how many of you have heard of remaining service life? Okay. We have only, let's give it another couple seconds here and we'll close it out. Okay, well, I'm happy to see that some of the agencies either use it or considering using it, and we'll tell you why it's so important to think about that. You see, one of the things we're really trying to do with the remaining service life, it isn't for you or me, it's to communicate our needs to these people holding the purse strings and to the public. And we'll get into that in a minute. But I'm happy that it's about 50-50 that have heard of it. So let's just go on and talk about the importance of it. Okay. Let's go back to the interstate system. And, you know, being from Missouri, this is where it all started. You know, the interstate system was started back in 1956, and the first leg of it was in St. Charles County. I I-70. That was the first one. Believe it or not, I-70 was the last one too. That was out in Glenwood Canyon in Colorado. It's kind of interesting because when you look at the interstate system, in the old days, everything was concrete. You may also realize that every road was designed exactly the same way. And why was that? Well, the feds mandated the fact that we did not want to give any state or any city or anybody any advantage, even if they had more traffic or not. They were all going to be the same depth. They were going to be the same width. Everything was going to be exactly the same. Well, but they built them with concrete, and you know something? They worked. The shoulders were chip seals. They were triple chip seals back in those days. And I know when I was with the DOT, we had a section in Michigan that was constructed in 1957 on I-75, and it's still there. Concrete road. So back in those days, they knew what they were doing. Doesn't say we didn't know what we're doing or don't know what we're doing today, but let's not dismiss the old guys, because they knew what they were doing and they build them right. Let's talk about lifespans. Everything out there has an average lifespan. People have an average lifespan. We tend to forget that roads have a lifespan as well. And it's important to think about this, but the only difference is that every living thing here, the life can be extended if we take care of ourselves and get proper medical care. But here's the other thing. These can almost last forever if they're properly constructed and maintained. I had a discussion with Buzz Powell a number of years ago. Buzz is at NCAT, and many of you have heard of him. Maybe some of you know Buzz, very nice individual. And Buzz was telling me that, you know something, our roads could last forever if we took care of them. And think about that. If we did the proper preservation techniques on our roadways, they would last forever. And right now, NCAT is doing some studies, and they're showing that preservation treatments last far longer than anybody ever anticipated. And they extend the life far more than anybody ever anticipated. So it's very, very important to think about our pavements as far as a thing that has a life, a pavement life. And here's the analogy. Your design pretty much is set up based on a structural component, although nowadays they use, designs which very few people get into that kind of detail, that you can actually look at the maintenance cycle and look at the environment, look at so on and so forth. But if you think about your design life, it's based on the structural component. It's usually something like 20 years, 25, 30. It could even be whatever design life you want. But as that life starts to pass by, that time passes by, you don't want to let that road fall back to zero where it has no life. You want to add some life to it. And that's what you're doing with preservation. You're adding life to the original roadway. And what we have found, the earlier you start it, the longer you're going to make it live. So the pavement life extension is really the time that the first distress may appear until it reverts back to that same condition as the distress was when it first appeared. That's known as the reflective time. Maybe I didn't say it right, but this is the definition. The extended life is the elapsed time in years from the application of the treatment until the pavement reverts back to the time of the treatment. Same condition. That's your life extension, and we can measure it. It's not that difficult to measure if you're starting to measure with indices. And here's an example. You know that when the pavement is new, it's probably as good as it's ever going to be. So you're taking your PMS data point at 0. And then maybe your system is set up for 2 years, maybe 3 years later, and you're taking another data point. Although some states on their interstate, they're checking it every year. Let's just say 2 years, 3 years is an average. And then you do it again. And so you're starting to form that curve, whatever it may look like, and they're not all the same. But at some point in time, you're actually going to put a treatment on that roadway and you're going to make it look better. You're going to improve it. It's going to be a better road when you're done. And then you're going to continue to track your pavement condition just like you always have. Every 2 or 3 years, you're going out and take some measurements, indices. When that pavement condition falls back to the same point as it was before, that is your measured life extension. So it's not a pie in the sky idea. It's really something that can be measured. Now, they have been measured, and you'll see the measurements and you'll see the averages posted in this report. It's an NCHRP report. Actually, it's through SHARP, the SHARP 2. I think it's called the Strategic Highway Research Program, and it was the second part of it. And there's a report out there. My slides will be posted through the LTAP, so you'll be able to get all of this stuff. You don't have to write it down. They've defined rural roadways as anything less than 5,000 ADT, and urban roadways, and I got it backwards there a little bit, but urban roadways are greater than 10,000 ADT. This is how they define it. And why do they define it? Is because it makes a difference on life extension. These are the treatment life extensions that they had in that report. And that report was a number of years ago, and things have really got updated since then. So we know what the life extensions are on a number of treatments. Here's one of the points I want to make. Your treatment life is not the same as your life extension. Your treatment may give you an idea. A rejuvenator, you'll spray a rejuvenator on the roadway, and after they're gone, you'll say, well, what did that do for me? I don't see any treatment life there at all, except it's just extended your pavement life another 3 to 6 years. You know, a crack sealing operation, opposed to crack filling, but crack sealing operation, you'll seal up the roadway. Maybe that sealant holds good on your roadway 3 years, maybe as long as 8 years. But your life extension, what did it actually give that pavement that crack seal was put onto? It might give you 2 to 4 years. You can see that it's different all the way down through there. So think about life extension, not how long the treatment lasts. We're really putting it on for the underlying pavement. So what is remaining service life? Well, it's years until reconstruction is needed without any kind of preservation actions. So it's a function of your deterioration rate and your distress indexes. And there's all kinds of indices you can use to look at your pavements. Like I said, only look at the ones that are killing you first. Here's the shortcoming of a distress index. We talked about it. This is typically what you see is your distress indexes. Unless you can track that rate of deterioration, they can fool you, because they may start out very good, but after a number of years, they could be worse than the road that maybe doesn't start out quite as good. This is an actual plot. I think this is out of Canada. Okay, let's talk about what's the advantage of a remaining service life. Well, one of the things, it overcomes the shortcomings of the distress index. It gives you the rate of deterioration. It takes into account what the original design life was. And so I think the most important part of the remaining service life is what I said before. You can communicate effectively with your elected officials or your lay people that just don't know anything about your roadways. So let's get into the next one here. All right, what is the end of life? What's the end of life of a roadway? It's what you say it is. In other words, you know what the end of the life of your roadway is. That's when you're sitting in your desk and your phone begins to ring and you start getting these obscene phone calls that people are screaming how bad the road is. And you better fix it. That's the end of your life. If I took 3 or 4 of you and I set you down in a room and I said, I want you to tell me how much rutting, and see my distress index there, how much rutting is acceptable for you? How much cracking is acceptable for you, whether it's transverse or fatigue or what. In other words, I took 3 or 4 of you folks and I set you down in a room. You could come up with what are these terminal threshold values for each indice. It's not rocket science. And a lot of people that set up these pavement management systems, you know, they tell you they can do this. You know, the only one that knows your system is you. You're the best folks to know your system. A person from the outside cannot come in and tell you what your terminal threshold index should be. So we'll get into this. This is a very detailed type of thing, but let's just say that I set my threshold index at 60. That's the end of life. Now, that doesn't mean my road is unusable, but beyond that point, people are pretty upset. And there's another definition if you really want to get into it. Anything beyond the terminal threshold means that the only financial feasible option you have is to reconstruct your road. Because anything you're doing, pothole patching, whatever you're doing, you're throwing money down a rat hole. So it doesn't mean your road is impassable, but it's pretty doggone close and people are not happy with it. So the only financial feasible option you have beyond your terminal threshold is to reconstruct it. So threshold value. Everything between perfect and your threshold, that's acceptable. The people can drive on it. Anything past that is unacceptable. It needs repair or needs major reconstruction. So let's talk about your service life, because definitions kind of come into this thing. Well, design life is, if you got a 20-year design, that means that's the time from the time it's constructed until it hits your terminal condition. So if you have a 20-year life, design life, that should be 20 years until it gets to that terminal condition. It doesn't include any kind of preservation treatments in there. That's just design. And it's a years for the design. You know, they calculate your loading based on easels. And this whole design is really a structural calculation. I want you to think about design life as a structural calculation, because your roads can deteriorate if you don't take into account the environment. In the environment, more roads fail due to environmental conditions than they do from structural conditions. Service life. It's a time when it's constructed all the way to its terminal condition, and that includes your preservation time. So let's just say you have a 20-year design life and I do a number of preservation treatments and each one is adding a certain amount, maybe 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. I've just got 15 more years on my design life, so I can keep on going. And that was what Buzz Powell and I were talking about. If we do preservation on these roads, we can keep these roads in good condition forever, as long as they're structurally sound. So, simple graph. Here's my design life 0 to 20. That's a red line. But yet if my pavement service life, and that's when I'm adding preservation, I can get another 10 years out of it. So these are definitions. estimated number of years after the service life, that's my design life. Remaining service life, that's predicted number of years of service from any given date on that curve. The age, that's standalone, and then my service life is my sum of remaining service life plus my age. Simple graph. You can see SA surface age, that's that point in time. You know, the road is maybe in this point 8 years old, 9 years old, and yet your service life can be out a little over 15 years because we're adding more time. My remaining service life at this point is probably about 6 years remaining service life. I'm not, due to time, I'm not going to get into an awful lot of examples here, but this is not rocket science, folks. This is pretty straightforward stuff. Anybody that can add, subtract, multiply, and divide can probably work on this. Now we can get some sophisticated algorithms that can really take this apart, that can be very sophisticated, but the whole basis of this is pretty straightforward. So here's an example. We have this road rated from 0 to 100, 100 being perfect. I like that because everybody can understand it. We want to make it simple. You go to school, you get 100 on your paper, you know, you got a perfect paper. Let's just say the teacher says you're going to fail anything below 60. Well, threshold is 60. We set it wherever we want it to be. Just like the teacher could make your threshold at 70 or could be a 50. It was built in 2010. Well, that means 11 years old, and your distress index in 19 was 75. So estimate your remaining service life and your total service life. Okay, it's just simple triangles, and I won't go through all the math here. It's just proportion. That's all it is. But this will be up on the website. Here's the calculation, simple proportion, and you'll need a minute to kind of let it sink in, but it's nothing difficult about this calculation. We can get more sophisticated. We can get into each one of the distress indices. And in this case, maybe we're looking for alligator cracking, which is a structural distress. And we'll talk about it the next time we meet. We'll talk about those distresses that you don't do preservation with. You have to make repairs before you do preservation in that case. But this is, 0 to 100, threshold is 60, maximum allowable extent. And this is where your group of 3 or 4 people say, how much alligator cracking will I say that the road can have before it gets to a terminal condition? Well, my low severity, which are those real fine cracks, real tiny ones, I'll allow my road to have 100% of those. But my medium severity ones, maybe those that are 1/8 inch wide, in that vicinity, maybe only 50%. And the high severity ones, and the ones that everybody associates with alligator cracking, I'm only going to allow 10% of my road to have high severity. So what's my alligator cracking index? Well, these are the calculations, and I'm not trying to have you memorize all this right now, but I'm just trying to show you that it's not rocket science. Every one of you out there can do these calculations. It's pretty straightforward. Now, remember I said, don't go out there chasing all these distresses, because if you're chasing distresses, did you realize there's 17 types of distresses in your flexible or asphalt pavements, and there's 19 types of distresses in your concrete or your rigid pavements? You're not going to need to chase all these distresses because they don't happen in your area, all 17. You're not going to see them. The distresses that Chris is going to talk about in Florida may be different than what you have in Missouri, which are different than maybe what they have in Oregon, and certainly different than in Alaska. Only go after the distresses that are killing your network first, the ones that you see day in, day out. So I'm going to give you a survey question here. Can you put the question up, Kristen? Christie?
It should have been up. Hold on.
Okay, I think it's there. I see it now.
You see it?
Yep. Which RSL should be used? The transverse crack, the longitudinal crack, alligator crack, block crack, or rut? What RSL would you pick? Give you a few more seconds. Okay. Let's end the poll and see what we have. Well, a few of you figured it out. And let me give you the analogy. Let me put symptoms of a person. This is John Doe. And John Doe goes to the doctor. And the doctor says, well, I've given you a complete physical, and this is what I found. You have this problem with your bones, and you're probably going to tip over in about 11 years. But you also have this skin condition, and this is going to really affect you, and you're probably going to tip over and die in 14 years. Your alligator cracking. Well, you don't have alligator cracking, but you got this heart issue. And this heart issue is going to get you in 7 years. That's pretty significant. You go down through, finally, you've got this rare form of whatever it is, and it's going to get you in 6 years. Do I really care about how bad my bones are or whatever? I'm worried about what's going to get me first. And that's the same way we have to look at those indices. What indice is going to kill me first? And in this case, the rutting on this pavement of 6 years is what's going to get my road first. And that is what I better address while I still have time. And see how this works is pretty simple. Let's move on to the next one here. Here's an example, my terminal threshold. I'm saying 60, road A, okay. I've decided I'm going to, at 4 years of remaining service life, I'm going to put a treatment on that road. And the treatment I've chosen is going to give me a 5-year life extension. Now, this could be maybe a chip seal in this road, or maybe it's a slurry seal. So I'm improving my condition, and all of a sudden, because I just added 5 years of life extension, my remaining service life is now 9 years until it reaches my terminal threshold. But before it reaches my terminal threshold, I wanna, and I'm down to 2 years of remaining service life, I've decided to put another treatment on. And maybe this one is what we call ultra thin bonded overlay, or a wearing course. And this one gives me a 10-year life extension. And all of a sudden now, instead of 2-year remaining service life, I've improved it up to 12 years. And now I've got a 12-year life extension. Here's the magic. Instead of this road do nothing, crashing and burning and hitting my terminal threshold at 15 years, all of a sudden by 2 treatments, I've extended it out, double its life to 30 years. It's not rocket science, folks. We're getting on them early, we're putting a treatment on them, and we're extending the life, and we can get a lot more life out of that road. And you know, if we start at the top of the curve farther up, where maybe we've got almost 12-year life extension, and we put something very light on it, we might be able to keep that road alive almost forever if we start early enough. So that's the whole point. So remember this about preservation. If you do it too late, it's a waste. You're throwing money down a rat hole. If that road is down to the point of no return, you're just wasting your money. You've got to put the treatments on early, on the right treatment, the right road at the right time. That's a mantra. So now let me give you something that all of you can use, and this is how you talk to your elected officials. A number of years ago, I come up with this, and Jim Sorensen, a great friend of mine, he's team leader of Federal Highway, and he really believed in preservation too. We come up and develop this quick check of your highway network health. And I want to show you how it works, because all of you can use this to take your case to your elected officials or somebody that doesn't understand what you're trying to achieve, and it works. And it's been proven as work by many agencies around the country. And an awful lot of local agencies are using this to make their point to their elected officials. So I'm going to give you an example. Once we go through the example, then there's a form you can use, and it really comes out really nice. Your network, let's just say that you have a network, your agency, and you got 4,356 lane miles. Well, why am I talking about lane miles? Because probably most of you talk about centerline miles. Well, if you're going to bid a job, you don't bid it by centerline. You're calculating how many lanes you want to pave or you want to work on. Think about your network size in lane miles. Always think lane miles, not centerline miles. And you know, I could talk about the interstate. Well, if the interstate, do I know if it has 2 lanes in each direction or 3 lanes in each direction, or maybe in some places 4 lanes in each direction? It's all important to know lane miles, not centerline miles. Okay, now we said this is on a network, the 4,356 lane miles. So I plotted up every one of my segments of road. And you can see that in my entire network, I have some roads that are just falling through the door. They're zero life, they're shot. And then I have other roads that are almost brand new, and I've got 20 years, 21, 22, all the way up to 25 years. I've got some great remaining service life in there. But here's the problem. And this is what so many people face. Look what happens. Next year at this time, see all those roads that are in year 1? They go to year 0. If, like Chris was saying earlier, you can't chase the worst first because you'll never catch up. All of these bars are like waves hitting the beach, one right after the other after the other. You have not got enough money to ever dig your way out of this thing by using worst first. So just think of this. These roads every year, and I'm saying this on average, because some years, some roads don't age as quick as other roads. But on average, every one of these bars move 1 year to the left each year. So remember, you can never dig your way out of it because they're all going to come crashing in on you. You've got to start working on those roads that are year 5, year 10, maybe at year 20. Push them back, push them back. That way they don't come crashing in on you at the same time. Okay, let's get back to the point. 4,356 lane miles, and each year my network will lose 4,356 lane mile years. In other words, my entire network ages 1 year in 1 year's time. Not difficult. So here's what you're faced with in your agency. Let's just say your agency has enough money to do this stuff, but I know a lot of agencies don't, but I'm making a point here. You have 2 projects that you want to reconstruct. One is 22 lane miles, and it's got a 25-year design life. What happens when you multiply, and look at the units here, you multiply my lane miles by my design life, I get 550 lane mile years. Lane mile years, remember this last one here? Each year we lose 4,356 lane mile years. Project number 2, 18 lane miles, design life 30 years, 540 lane mile years. My cost over $20 million. Now I'm going into my rehabilitation. The same thing, rehab is just a shorter design life. And well, we can look at the definitions. One of the things I'll tell you about rehab, some states will call a project a rehab, while the other state might call it reconstruction. So these definitions are not consistent from state to state to state. They're different. But let's just say these are rehab projects. That lane miles 22, design life 18, you get the point. Lane mile years, that's what we're really looking for. The cost of rehab is a little less, $15 million plus. And now let's look at preservation. I'm not talking about design life here, I'm talking about life extension. It doesn't matter if it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. You see what happens, my lane miles multiply by 2, I still get the same units, lane mile years. So what I do is and I've only spent a little over $1 million. So let's tally some stuff up here. All right. My reconstruction, I've got 1,090 lane mile years. Rehab, 1,200 lane mile years. Pavement preservation, only 412 lane mile years. 2702, when I tally it up, I spent $37 million. This is my costs. Nobody would argue with that. Matter of fact, on some of the preservation treatments, I can probably put a penny sign down there in proportion with the others, because some of them are very inexpensive. So this is what you're all facing, folks. My network size, 4,356 lane mile years. All my programmed activity. See this, 2702? 2702, that means I'm running a deficit. I'm corkscrewing my network in the ground. It's getting worse and worse and worse every year because I'm focusing on the worst first, like Chris was talking about. This is why we talk about preservation. This is what you have to think about. Maybe your reconstruction can't be 40 lane miles this year. Maybe you can find a break point. You're going to do 31 lane miles. And maybe your rehab is not going to be 82. It's going to be 77 lane miles. And maybe by doing this, I've just saved a ton of money. I've saved $6.1 million. So what I'm going to do is take that $6.1 million and I'm going to start putting it into some preservation treatments. I'm still doing some reconstruct, I'm still doing some rehab, but I'm going to take a lot of that money and I'm going to put it in preservation. And why? Because I don't want my network to get worse every year. And if I take my life extension, my lane miles, and I'm cranking up the number of lane miles I'm doing in preservation, guess what I got? Lane mile years. Add them all up, and you know what? It balances out, because now I'm still doing some reconstruct, I'm still doing some rehab, and I'm going to do a whole lot of preservation. And guess what? My network is not getting worse overall. It's not really improving yet, but I've still got a net savings now of over $500,000. And maybe I want to do another lane mile of reconstruct. Maybe I want to pour it into preservation and start. If your numbers actually start to improve, in other words, your totals down here are greater than what's required for your network up here, you're improving your network condition. If this number here is smaller than what your network needs, that means you're corkscrewing your network in the ground. It's a simple calculation. You guys, you folks can do it all very simply with what you know. It works on any network. You can do it on a city. You can do it on a county. You can do it on your interstate systems. You can do it on your state routes. You could do it on your secondary routes. You could do it on your boulevards. You can divide them up any way you want to do it. Whatever network, or you could take your entire state network. I've done them for the states, and not that many states are most of them are corkscrewing themselves in the ground. You can evaluate your construction, rehab, and preservation. It incorporates your design life, things you know, and your life extensions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris. And Chris is going to be the cleanup man today. So Chris,
Let's
I'm
do
going to
it.
stop sharing it, and I'm going to give it right over to you.
I have got it. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. Good stuff. So we are in overtime officially. So we are going to get to it. Let's hope that we can kind of keep rolling here. In fact, I was going to suggest that we not even do any more polls, and we'll just kind of keep cruising here. So let's get to it. The last little section that we're going to talk about is really how the worst first is a road to ruin. And the reason we say that is that in every aspect of, life, whether that be, putting on sunscreen before you go to the beach, whether that's, the maintaining your Ferrari in this condition so that it doesn't become, a worthless piece of junk, whether that's, putting out the fire while it's small and manageable. All of these things are related to what we know to be the case with preventative versus reactive. Now, unfortunately, this is where a lot of us live, is we're reactive. We let failure tell us when to address an issue rather than have it be condition or even, this is not as bad, but age-based. Okay, so when you want to do, anything with your fixed assets in your network, always better to get away from reactive, which is worst first, and go proactive. A predictive, condition-based, which is what Larry's talked about, right on time versus too early. Too early costs us money too. Worst first is the least favorite of our possible scenarios here, and this is why. Again, I've used Polk County several times. When they compared worst first in future years, this is when they implemented their program, the number of total lane miles treated for their $15 million budget over 10 years, you could see they could treat either 175 miles or 460 miles. And so you can see from the orange bar versus the green bar, how much more efficient and effective it was to be optimized versus worst first. And what that enabled them to do was kind of gap the worst first versus the optimized, as far as this is a 9-point PCI difference over 10 years. Now that may not sound like a lot, but they have something like almost 5,000 lane miles, over 5,000 lane miles. So it's a huge network. So based on, the impact to their budget, when they were just, basically worst first county, they were anywhere from 60 to 70, 75 centerline miles treated with their 10 to 12 million. Then that increased when they implemented top of the curve. They did some rejuvenation and some micro, and then they got very, very aggressive with diversifying their portfolio, I should say, to where they are now. Now they're really at that 65-35. Now notice, this still means that 65% of their budget is on rehab and some overlays. You can see minor and major rehab and reconstruction. That still takes up the majority of their budget, but they've really come to the realization that the rejuvenation, the microsurfacing, the chip seal, the cold in place recycling, some of these alternative processes, or what we call alternative processes, are very, very effective and efficient. And so now they can get close to that 200 centerline miles addressed per year. So again, it's so much harder to save the dying roads, and it takes a lot more money and a lot more effort than to just keep the good roads good. So if we can use these different processes, whether that be micro, whether that be chip seal, This is a cold in place recycling candidate. We're going to get into that in module 4. I just want to tell you again, those modules 3 and 4, we're going to get into these specific treatments. Module 2, we still have some other exciting things to go through on the planning side. But really right now, I just want to throw out some, just a quick quote. This is, again, one size does not fit all very well. All right. So I really don't ever see one size fit well. And so we want to try to get away from that. So this is my favorite Albert Einstein quote, but then I would say that we can open it up. If there's any quick questions, we can do that. Otherwise, I just want to kind of open it up to Jack as well, and he can kind of throw in a few more reminders and other housekeeping. Does anybody have any questions?
Do they know how to ask questions? They have to raise their hand?
You can raise your hand. And I also think you can use the chat if it's easier to use the chat if it's a short question. I think that's probably the best option since we're limited on time. You can always get a hold of us, otherwise too. Okay, and then there's actually a functionality for raising the hand, but you can actually put your video on and do it that way too. So if you, either way, we may not be looking at the screen because there's a lot of participants. So why don't we use the chat if we can?
Not seeing too many things pop up. I have to apologize. My internet went bad in my office, so.
I raised my own hand. You can go to reactions for those of you. You can go to reactions and raise your hand at any time. It sometimes gets a little harder when you've got more folks. But Jack, why don't we remind them what's going on with the next 3 modules, dates and all that?
Here's one question, Chris, is how do you know how much increase in service life for various treatments?
Yes. And Larry and I are going to be getting into that. Now, that is one of the things that we can do to tease our future modules, is let you know that we're going to be doing a deep dive on really the major treatments and what that shows. So it's a great question from Lawrence. We're going to get into that. Stay tuned. There wasn't enough time today, but there's actually some ranges typically, just like there's ranges in costs, and we'll get into that a little bit as well. So already looking ahead.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Larry.
Absolutely.
I want to thank, got one more. How can the public ignore a failing road to address good roads?
Oh, wow. That is a fantastic, question. I think the thing that answers that the best is that it does take discipline. The hardest thing is to tell people, look, here's what the deal is. We need to move away from addressing these worst roads and try to spend some of our money at the top of the curve. One of the things that we always tell people, though, is we never say you're going to spend 100% of your money or your funds on preservation. So we're always going to allocate only a smaller percentage. The majority is still going to those worst roads. So you're definitely not ignoring bad roads, but you do really are going to see, and we're going to show you more in these next 3 modules, but you're going to see could be a 2 to 3 times more miles treated by going with more of an optimized approach.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chris.
that's a typical issue all across the country. I mean, you've got limited amount of money. You've got roads that are just beyond anything other than reconstruct. And what do? And that's a difficult question. Everybody has to kind of look at their budget because every budget is different. But I think the first step is you've got to educate your elected officials. That's why it's very important to use remaining service life. When you start talking about individual roads, I can point to them and I can say, look, this road has 2 years life, remaining service life. This road has 8. Now this road has 0, but the one that has 2 carries all this traffic. And if you let that one go, you're going to get twice as many people screaming at you as you would by addressing the one that's 0. I mean, you've got to look at the scenarios, but that's what's so important. And when you start we could show you that if you add up all those segments together, your network health is the average of all the remaining service lives put together. And some agencies may have your network remaining service life of 4, which means you're in big trouble. You've got to be able to communicate that effectively to your elected officials who hold the purse strings.
Yep.
And that's all I can say. You're not going to get any more money unless you can prove your point. And if you can show them, look, you guys are responsible for your entire network. I mean, the elected officials. And if you're vocal about it and you can make the case, I think that you can get somewhere. Now, I can't always say you're going to get somewhere, but you know, that's your only hope.
They're going to be more receptive than you think, in my experience. And we'll get into that. I love Module 2. We've got a lot of great content coming up. So definitely tune into that one. Do they have the date on that, Jack, or you want me to look it up? I think I've got it here somewhere. That's 9/28, if I'm not mistaken. So September 28th, we'll be back. And we're going to go through Module 2. It's got a lot of great information, but that one's a tough one. And we're going to give you some ammunition on how to, kind of fight that battle most effectively.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Larry. I'm looking forward to that. I know that's a tough question. Thanks, Mr. Sissel. But it's one everybody has to deal with. And it's all about crafting that sales pitch to the elected officials, showing them the facts and being able to deliver it. But so we're obviously out of time. We do have the second, third, and fourth module coming up. We'll be throwing more flyers out your way for that. And I want to thank Heath and Christy from LTAP for partnering up with us. And what we're going to do is we're going to send out this presentation to the attendees. And I guess we'll send everybody's information, or Chris and Larry, in case you guys have questions offline that you want to talk with Chris and Larry about. We'll email the attendees those if you want to dig in more about different questions you had. And with that, like I said, we'll send all this out, and we look forward to seeing everybody on the next module. And appreciate all the time. Appreciate you guys attending, and look forward to hopefully doing this in person here next year. So bear with us on this. Is our first webinar. Everybody's learning it, and I think it was a success. Thanks to Christy. You did a great job.
Thanks, Christy.
You guys
Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you guys for partnering with us. I appreciate it. Look forward to part 2.
Absolutely. We'll see you
Christy,
guys
I'll get
next
with
month.
you here later today or tomorrow.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
See you,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.